Hi, I'm Carl Randle and welcome back to another episode of the Frontline Security Podcast. Now, this podcast aims to give you the best insights into the private security industry by talking to some of the key influencers within security. And today, we've gone right to the top. With me is the CEO of the SIA. It's Michelle Russell. And today, we're going to be talking all about the SIA. What it is, the impact it's had on the security industry, and of course, Michelle's journey to becoming the CEO. Here's what's coming up.
The more difficult piece to deal with is, as you say, the fake licenses or the fake training courses or the fake certificates which are out there. I think we've worked out that if you follow inflation from when it was first introduced 20 years ago, we should be on at least £400.
Wow.
Because as soon as they know SIA is on the premises, either people sometimes run out the back door before we get there, and there will always be people who try to take advantage for monetary value.
The big question that everyone is asking, are the top-up training courses going to continue? Okay, so Michelle, first of all, thank you for taking the time to come and speak with me today.
You're very welcome.
Let's dive into it.
Okay, let's go.
So for anybody who is new to the security industry, what is the SIA?
So SIA stands for Security Industry Authority. That's the name that Parliament gave us 20 years ago when we were set up, but most people call us the SIA or know of us as the SIA. We're a public body, so we report into the Home Office, and we're charged with regulating activity in the private security industry. Not all activity, but some activity. And our main our main functions, if you like, we have three main functions. Firstly, to license people for those activities. Secondly, to run an improved contractor scheme, which is voluntary for businesses. And thirdly, to enforce and make sure that those who should have a licence to carry out those activities do so. So we're a government body. We're charged with regulating those pieces of private security practice. And the reason why we're given that, the reason why we're a public body and it's not self-regulating, is because it really matters. It's about public protection, public safety, keeping people safe.
Yeah. And is that pretty much the main mission of the SIA, keeping people safe?
So when I joined as the chief executive 4 years ago now, and the new chair, Heather Bailey, and the board, that's one of the things that we brought us back to, which is the reason why we exist, the reason why we're a public body is about public protection. So absolutely everything that we should do should be focused on, is it about keeping people safe and protecting the public, although we're talking about private security.
And I mean, the SIA has been going on for over 20 years now. What would you say are the biggest achievements?
So if you cast your mind back 20 years ago, the environment was there was no regulator. So there was no one checking that there was vetting, minimum standards of training, checking people that, making sure that people who shouldn't be in the industry were not actually in the industry and causing harm. So the fact that we actually existed and were created made a huge difference to both making sure people who we want in the industry to play that part were allowed to come in, as well as keeping the people who shouldn't be in out. So that's the first thing. By our existence is a huge change that's raised standards. The second thing I'd pull out over the course of the years is everything was on paper to start with. So it was taking your paper applications, going physically in. It was very slow. So one of the biggest changes, I think, over the last 20 years is the process is online. It's digital. It's really quick. So that's a significant change that's happened over the last 20 years. And as I said, more recently, bringing back that focus, which is this is not just about licensing people. This is about making sure that they're properly trained, that they keep up with public expectations. It's changing all the time. It changed during COVID, about what we'd expect a private security officer to do. They're no longer in buildings protecting private companies and private buildings. They're quite often the public face that you're going to see as you walk down the high street here, or you go into offices in a city, or if you're going to events or festivals, festival season at the moment, you're going to see private security operatives, even though you're in a public setting. So I'd say that's quite a significant change that I hope we've brought back and you can start seeing, or you are seeing, as you're out and about.
Yeah, I think the big thing you touched on there is, years ago before the SIA, anyone was working in security. So you did technically have criminals and all sorts working on the doors. So it just wasn't good for anybody's safety. But another thing there that I have noticed over the past couple of years is the turnaround time to getting your license is so much quicker now. People can literally get trained, get the license, and then be in work in literally a couple of weeks.
It is. It's changed significantly. When I speak to colleagues who've been in the organisation for a long time, they were saying there were queues sometimes of 3-4 months for people to get a licence. Whereas you're right now, if it's straightforward and if we get your DBS check back quickly, it can be in hours, minutes. I've had one person that's been within an hour of submitting it that says, I can't believe we've got our licence so quickly. That's obviously straightforward. And if it's more complicated even or complex because of what we have to deal with, the average turnaround that we're working to is 25 working days, so 5 weeks. But you can apply up to 4 months early if you're on a renewal, so that you're not waiting at the last minute.
And since the SIA was brought in, what would you say that people's conceptions of the SIA is, and how would you like to change them?
So I think it's a really good question. And I think depending on who you ask at what time, they might give you a different answer. So there are some people who think that we're all based in an office, busying away on paper, don't speak to anyone in the industry. We've got no one that works or has been through and got a badge, whereas actually it's the opposite. Yes, there are some people that are based in our office because we have to have an office to get together, but over 30% of the organisation, and there's about 400 of us, are based all around the UK. So from Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, all across England as well. So I think that's one of the things I really hope not only to sort of change the misconception of, but to actually give comfort that we're out there on the ground, particularly the inspectors that we have, but also those that are working positively with businesses, so our business relationship managers. And I think that's one of the things that's changed again recently, so that we weren't happy to talk to businesses, that you had to go through, online digital pieces. I think we've changed that over the last 2 to 3 years. So we're much more visible, going out to visit and talk to the industry, talk to stakeholders, and hopefully you also get some feedback that I do that as well. I'm really keen to go out on some of the inspections that my teams have, to actually talk to frontline licence holders, ask them what the process has been like. What would you change about the SIA? How quickly did you get your badge? What was your training course like? Have you actually used anything recently? So that visibility piece, I think, is one of the things that I'd challenge back now, and it is improving on our sort of perception and the misconceptions that some people have. The other thing I'd say is, and it might link to something I know you want to ask me later, which is about what we can and cannot do. So I think some people think that we can, set wages and we have power to set wages. Some people think we're their employer. So we have employment responsibilities towards them, and we don't. We just provide a licence that says they're ready to go into the workplace. So all sorts of things that I tend to get as questions, or we thought you did this, or we thought you could have power to do that. Why can't you just shut them down? We can't.
Yeah, I see hundreds of comments being like the SIA should set the wages, or do the SIA set the wages? And yeah, it's not the case at all. But going forward, what would you say you see the main challenges are for the SIA and the private security industry?
Well, perhaps there's two parts to that. Should we do one, the SIA first, and then the industry? They do overlap a little bit, but a little bit different as well. So for the SIA, one of the things I'm really conscious of, and I always have been, is that we're paid for by the licence fee applicant. So it's under licence fee. The person who pays for their licence is paying for the SIA. So I'm really keen to make sure that, firstly, every penny counts, that we're spending wisely, but also how can we be more efficient? How can we be more effective? Some people probably not aware that at the moment we're subsidising the licence fee by £20. I'm trying to work really hard to make sure when that subsidy ends that we're not in a position of having to increase fees. Can't make any promises, but we're working really hard to be efficient and effective as an organisation at what we do. So I think that's one of the challenges that's on my plate. And secondly, I suppose against that is the expectations on us as people want us to do more. Why aren't you doing much more about catching training providers that are not up to the mark? Why aren't you taking more enforcement action? Why can't you come and visit us and come and talk to us? So at one side, I've got to keep the fees proportionate, an efficient and effective organisation, trying to look ahead to see what's coming around the corner, as well as managing expectations. And it's a bit tricky because we have a limited set of powers, a limited budget, but we've got a lot of will and desire to work with the industry to make sure that what we're charged with doing is done to the best of our ability. And we keep agile and flexible, watching for the next thing that comes around the corner.
Yeah, and touching on the fee for the SIA licence application, it did actually come down because it was originally £190, wasn't it? And it came down to £184. But I had no idea that you guys subsidised quite a large proportion of it, really.
So I think we've worked out that if you follow inflation from when it was first introduced 20 years ago, we should be on at least £400.
Wow.
Yeah. But at the moment, the amount that the licence payer pays, the applicant pays, is £184. The cost to us at the moment is £204. We've reduced it over the past few years. The last one that we did was just over a year ago, which was bringing it down by £6. I know that doesn't seem a lot, but that's more than £1 million on the budget that I've had to find to actually reduce. So every penny that we can try and give back or try and use to make us more efficient, I think does make a difference, and it's really important. And one of the messages I give to my own staff is to make sure that we're thinking about, actually, this is paid for by the licence applicant, who may well be on minimum wage or not much more above minimum wage. Not all companies pay for the licence fee. Some do, but not all. So actually, for the individual who's going through the process, every penny matters to them.
100%. You touched on before that you like to work with security membership organisations and security companies. How important is that?
It's really important to me, and I know it's really important to my senior team as well. So strategically, it's really important that we know what's going on with the industry. If you haven't got a regulator or a public body that knows what's going on in the industry, then there's a real danger that they divert or do things that are not informed by the impact it can really have. So one of the things we did a few years ago was to reach out to the major membership bodies of different, reaching into different parts of the industry. So IPSA, who focus on frontline operatives, BSIA, who work with a number of companies, the Security Institute, which is working with more of the professionals and hire more experts. Also Security Commonwealth, which is looking at a different cut, as well as ASIS. So we have regular engagement with them as a collective through our stakeholder forum. But I also meet with the chief executives or with members of those membership bodies on a regular basis. We also try to work, one of the other reasons why we try to work with him is we don't want to overlap or step into things that they're already doing really well. So we want to try and make an impact or help to facilitate perhaps more joint working between those organisations. So sometimes we'll lead on things because that's my responsibility to do, and I won't shirk that. Sometimes we'll facilitate things happening, which is a bit more in partnership. Sometimes we'll lend our voice to things that the industry are doing, subject to the rules that I'm under as a government body. And then there'll be other things which, I'll need to say, actually, this is not for us. This is you to lead on. So I think it's been really valuable for us to work with the membership bodies in that way to try and do some things. And there's 3 or 4 overlapping themes that we're working on. Again, we're not leading on them necessarily. So about improving the perception of the industry, trying to get more positive stories out about the good work that the men and women who are working 24/7 are doing. We're doing some work, again, to support a more inclusive industry, to support the industry in the work that they're doing, to opening it up and talking about belonging, inclusivity, improving diversity. The industry's leading on some work about making security a profession that is a career choice, not just a job. And again, if we can support in terms of doing that, really happy to do so. And also ensuring fair terms and conditions and treatment of people who are working in the security industry, because if they're not safe and well, then it impacts on their ability to safely look after and safeguard the public, which comes back to that public protection piece that I was talking about at the start.
Now, the SIA have been running for over 20 years, and they're heavily impacted by the Private Security Industry Act of 2001. Given that this act was over 20 years ago, do you think that it's kind of hindered what the SIA can do at all in more recent times?
So you've got to work with the tools that you've got, right? The tools that you've been given, and you've got to, I would say, and my team would say, we've got to work within those rules to max them out as much as we can. And I'm confident that we do that as best we can. But if you asked me, if we went back now 20 years ago and you sort of started again, would it look the same in terms of what that legislation said and which powers we had? Then I think the learning that we've had over the last 20 years would inform that. So if being honest, there are some powers, so some things that have come up that we can't do because we don't have the power to do it. So we've been clear that actually we need these powers, or if we had these powers, we would be much more effective and efficient at doing some of the things that we're expected to do. And 20 years later, the public and the industry would want us to do. So, for example, quite often you'll see videos of people taking undercover videos of things. We can't do that unless we have the power as a public authority to go in and almost like undercover, or to do a test purchase, but without saying who we are. We need a power from Parliament to be able to do that. So we'd like to be able to do that, because if we rock up and we knock on the door, and if we're allowed in, can't force entry in, then actually people know that we're there. So we're not going to catch the people out that actually people want us to catch out, because as soon as they know SIA is on the premises, either people sometimes run out the back door before we get there, or they behave differently in front of us. So we use the powers we've got as much as we can, but if we were starting again, we'd look a bit different, I think, and ask for some different powers to help us.
Yeah, so that's impossible, really. Some of the things you want to do just can't.
We can't, but we've been vocal about. We've been honest. We've been honest about what we can and cannot do. And so, for example, on things like business licensing and where we think there's an extension required or a gap, we've highlighted that and said, actually, we think if this was filled or this was done differently, we could do something else. And actually, we could narrow the gap in terms of public protection risks. But ultimately, it's up to Parliament to decide what remit we're given and what they want to do. And it's my job and the organisation's job to make sure we implement that whilst both flagging up what we can and cannot do. And if we had, more powers, we'd perhaps do something a little bit differently. But it's like the resources question, isn't it? If you had a blank check, then actually that also impacts on what you can and cannot do. So, but part of our remit is to make recommendations for change. And over the past couple of years, we've been quite vocal and honest about actually this is what we'd like to change. Some more powers to help us with our enforcement side of things, some changes to the extent and remit. Business licensing is one of those areas that we've said we think that actually would improve public safety, and there's a good case for it. But at the moment, we're working in the voluntary space on that, and we'll continue whilst that is the remit we've been given to reset the voluntary scheme for business approvals, which is quite exciting, but there's a lot of work to do.
And currently there's lots of views around business licensing. So what is the SIA's opinions around that?
Well, business licensing was one of the recommendations that came out of the Manchester Arena inquiry. MR7 and MR8 were the two monitored recommendations. I was a witness in that inquiry, and I gave my views as asked by the inquiry that the SIA was supportive of business licensing and the recommendations made. And we've been honest about that. We've put together a case, but ultimately it's for Parliament and ministers to decide what to do. But we're disappointed that it's not been taken forward, but we are getting on with resetting the voluntary business approval scheme, and we'll definitely reset it based on public protection.
Yeah, just seems like there's loads of hurdles at the minute that you need to jump over.
There's lots of hurdles, but as long as you've got, I suppose it goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, which is as long as you're focused on what you're trying to achieve and why, which is about public protection and ensuring that regulation is effective and we're improving standards in private security. And as long as you're honest about that and you've got the will to do that, then despite the limitations, we haven't got a blank check of lots of resources, we haven't got all the powers that we need, I'm really proud to lead an organisation that's got the will and determination to do what we can.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the SIA training courses. So in 2021, the SIA introduced top-up training. And at the time, there was a lot of uproar about this. I don't want to do courses again. But in your views, what was the main reason for introducing these courses?
So being honest, this all started before I joined the SIA, but I came in at the implementation stage of things. So I know there was lots of consultation. It's about 6,000 people responded to the consultation on the changes and a lot of engagement. But the real motivation and the rationale for doing it is for some people, if they joined 5, 10, 15 years ago, almost 20 years ago, then actually they hadn't had any refresher training or top-up training from whatever the course was those 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So it was really relying on either that their employer or company had given them additional training and support, or they were remembering what they'd been taught all of those years ago. And I think one of the things I learned early on is the industry is not homogenous in the sense of some people will be employed by a company, so it's an employee relationship with a security company, but others freelance in effect. So they'll move from job to job and not have the safety and security of a single employer who's providing them with training and things like that. So there was two motivations. Firstly, to ensure a consistency amongst all operatives of those baseline skills. And secondly, skills fade. So things that perhaps people learn, as I say, 5-10 years ago, to go back to basics. And I think one of the motivations or catalysts for that is we often see the sharp end, the acute end when things go wrong. So the number of coroners' courts where there's been deaths resulting from interventions by private security. So all of that learning and feedback going back into the training courses which are produced for new applicants, but actually it was catching up or providing an opportunity to catch up for people who are already in the industry. And although it was momentous, because it's the first time that had been done in a long time, actually now, a couple of years later, the feedback I get when talking to people is there's generally something that people have said, do you know what, actually it was a really good reminder of usually physical intervention and safe restraints or the principles on searching. And the other area that I get a lot of feedback, positive feedback about, is the first aid requirement. And in fact, I quite often, when I go out to some of the awards ceremonies, it's the stories of heroism, of people saving people's life, sometimes using their first aid training. So it may have been a bit unpopular in some quarters at the time, but actually in terms of public protection, it's made a real impact, positive impact through that. And it's not over. So it's not a one-off top-up. That skills fade, that refreshing those skills is really important for going forward. And watch that space.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, especially with the skills fade. There's loads of scientific studies showing it is a real thing. And we've shared so many stories regarding where basic first aid has saved lives. I think with any kind of emergency, the first people to respond to the scene, first people on the scene, are usually security professionals. So, yeah, to me, I thought making sure that everyone is first aid trained is so important.
Yeah.
And the big question that everyone is asking, are the top-up training courses going to continue?
So yes, but not top-up, refresher. So the top-up was literally to top people up, to bring it up to the current courses. So mainly it's going to be refresher training. So when we talked about that skills fade on those key and critical areas. So your first aid certificate only lasts for 3 years anyway. So that needs to be refreshed. The counter-terrorism training, the ACT e-learning training specifically for security, which of course is free. And it's on Protect UK website. We've put it onto, worked with the police to put it onto the Protect UK website so you can go and access that. And I'd encourage people actually not to wait every 3 years to do that, but to actually refresh themselves. I do that one more regularly every year. So it's here to stay, I think. I think it's interesting. And the reason why I say it's here to stay is, again, one of the big messages that I got when I joined the organisation was we want to be regarded as a profession. And if it's a profession, you have to invest in the skills and knowledge of the people that are in that profession. So some of that falls to the employer or to the venue to invest in, professional development, and as you would do in any other profession. But some of that, I think, falls as so mandatory. It needs to be ensured for you to continue your licence. So refreshing those skills when they are those critical public safety, public protection ones is, I think, here to stay for the profession that is the security industry.
And overall, security training overall, how well do you think it prepares security professionals for life as a security professional?
So again, I think we've been honest and said it can't possibly be everything that you need to know in order to do your job effectively forever. But it's certainly the entry-level basic skills in order for you to go out on day one and do your job as a private security operative. And don't forget, there's different courses for different types of licences. So CCTV, close protection, door supervision, security guarding, etc. So it is not going to be everything for everyone, or a specialism, a specialist training course covering, everything that you need to know. But it's certainly the core, basic, entry level training and knowledge that you need in order to do the job. But that changes, doesn't it? I think we've talked about this. So this year, one of the things based on feedback that we've had and research is about spiking. So the courses for new entrants has already changed in April of this year to make it sharper and more in there about looking out for vulnerable people who might be spiked, and that will be fed into the refresher training when that goes live later on in the year.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much that can be covered in 6 days as well. But bringing in that spiking module, I think, is it's been crying for that for years. I mean, especially recently over the past couple of years, spiking's gone through the roof, hasn't it?
Yeah, and there's lots of great organisations, and it's not just through the training. There's organisations like Stamp Out Spiking, Safer Business Network, who are all doing different pieces to raise awareness of different aspects of public safety, particularly around violence against women and girls, but requiring some entry-level content that covers that enables any security operative to be alert to it and know what to do. Just seems, it needs the training, and we need to move with society that changes and the threats to society that change in the same way as a couple of years ago it was about terrorism. And you wouldn't have seen that as part of the training 10, 15 years ago. So it needs to adapt and keep up with what's happening and where those pressure points are.
So we've talked about the security training courses, the legitimate security training courses, but up and down the country there are, I think the BBC did an investigation last year and found all these counterfeit security training programs that are being run. And this just has obvious dangers.
So I think always worth starting with the fact that there are lots of really good training companies that are out there. The feedback when I go and speak to frontline security operatives, they've had, I've had a great course. My 6 days, my 3 days top up, whatever, was really good. It was a good refresher, great trainer. I'm going to remember things from it. But in every sort of world, there are also people that are operating at the other end of the scale. So, and there is a scale, a sliding scale. So there's things like malpractice. So things that are not done great, but you're still okay. But, a few things that are, not up to standard, to the other extreme, which is, you might have booked on a 6-day course and actually you've turned up and you've been told, you can only do it in one day, and here's the answers. So at one end is malpractice, and the other end, that's fraud. That's criminality. That's training criminality. And there will always be people who try to take advantage for monetary value of people they shouldn't be doing. So it is of concern to us because quite often people refer to it as SIA training. We don't provide the training. We set the specs. This is what the qualification needs to contain, but the awarding organisations then choose training providers and authorised training providers to deliver them, who choose their trainers, and the qualifications are regulated by Ofqual and others. So it's quite a difficult or complicated sort of structure of lots of different parties involved in it. But the bottom line is training criminality is not acceptable, and it damages the integrity of the licence. It damages the reputation of the security officer, but not only their reputation. If someone is meant to have had 6 days of training that's public safety critical training and they've skipped it and then they're on the job, they're not going to be able to do the job that if you and I went outside now and needed their help to be able to help us with, they wouldn't be able to do. So it's damaging to the reputation of the industry, it's damaging to the reputation of the SIA, but it's also risking public safety, and it's not acceptable. So we'll play our part, we'll do what we can do within the powers that we have, because we haven't got any specific powers that are in the legislation to shut down training centres or things like that. But we have to work in partnership with the other bodies that I just talked about to try and stop it. If we can and know about training criminality, then we will take action to try and bring people to justice, prosecutions for training fraud. And unfortunately for the victim, if they are the victim in it, they're going to have to do their training course again, because otherwise they're at risk of being a public safety risk as being a security officer. So where we can take action, we will. There's more that we're doing. I think, we've stepped back and had a thought about what more can we do as an organisation to make it more hostile for those who want to take abuse or abuse their system and take advantage in that way to stop them, as well as to support the legitimate, good training providers and awarding organisations that are trying to play their part to ensure that private security officers are well trained and have got their training and have got value for money from what they've paid for.
Yeah, and not only are there these fake training centres, there are fake websites as well where people are just selling the licenses, so you don't even need to turn up and do the training.
Yeah, so there's different things, isn't there? So on the ones where we know there's a training centre and we can do something about it, at the moment we've stepped up and we've doing more unannounced inspections. But as we've talked about before, we've got limited powers, so we have to knock on the door and ask to come in, and okay, it's unannounced, but they do know who we are when we're coming in to observe. So in some respects, that's the easier piece to deal with. The more difficult piece to deal with is, as you say, the fake licenses or the fake training courses or the fake certificates which are out there where perhaps people's identity have been stolen in order to get the training course or in order to get the license as well. We deal with sort of fake licenses, not just training courses. So again, that's about, if we know about it, we can't do anything about it unless we know about it. But we've got criminal investigators that we work with. We work closely with the police. We work closely with licensing authorities, with the industry, the awarding organisations, training bodies, in order to try and stop this, because ultimately it endangers public safety.
Yeah. So a few years ago when I first did my course, my identity was stolen because I did the course and I vlogged it to show everybody what to expect during the course, so the first aid, everything you do throughout the course, to getting the actual license. And obviously I got the license through, held it up to the camera, big smile, and obviously they just took a screenshot and plastered that all over the website, basically saying, we can get you legitimate licenses. One of those things. So if anyone is thinking about putting their license online, don't do it.
But also we've got to do something to stop it.
Yeah.
So, we've got to take action. We've got to report it. So if there's one message I can give is, please do report in to either ourselves through the website. We've made it clearer and easier about how to report training malpractice and training criminality through the awarding organisations, the police. We pay for a Crime Stoppers helpline. So if you want to remain anonymous and whistleblow or give information in that way, you don't feel comfortable. I hope you would feel comfortable coming to us because we do treat the information sensitively and carefully. But if you don't want to, there's also a way of going through the charity Crime Stoppers to be able to report that. Because unless we know about it, then we can't do anything about it specifically. And I know sometimes people get frustrated because they say, we've reported it in, but we've not heard anything. Two things I'd say there, which is, firstly, we're changing that. So we are doing more to try and reach out to people, say, thank you for reporting that. We will try and get back to you if we're taking it forward. But there will be situations where there's just not enough evidence that time for us to do anything about it, but we log it. So it may well be that the next time someone else comes back, we've then got another bit of the jigsaw puzzle to be able to take action. So my message is please, please, please don't sit there and say, did you see this? Mm. Please report it in one of the ways that I've indicated.
Yeah. And I know the SIA have an investigation and enforcement division, but what else do they look after besides dodgy courses and dodgy licenses?
So we have got an investigations and enforcement area, and following the Manchester Arena inquiry and when I came in, we put more resource than we ever have done into that area without increasing the licence fee. So we rediverted some resource and released some resource to be able to support that work. So part of the team deals with every single report of abuse or non-compliance. It goes into our intelligence team to assess and check what we've got on the record, what the complaint is. So if you actually go on our website and file I've got a concern about, they will read every single report that we receive, get all the referrals from the police. We'll send out information sometimes to the police if we need to know what's going on, or to our other partners. We also work closely with HMRC in terms of cash exploitation and worker exploitation. So we've got a team that does all of that. We've also got a team of inspectors. So these are my very dedicated, hardworking men and women who go out on inspections. Some of them are in daytime to office blocks or hospitals or shopping centres, but some of them are at night. Starting at work at 8 o'clock, perhaps till 2, 3 in the morning, going out and checking licences in venues. We carried out about 6,000 individual licence checks last year, about 1,000 venues, looking at 1,000 companies. So quite a lot of work there. Festivals as well. We go to festival sites for checking licence. We do a lot of pre-work as well, I think, so not just on the day. So we'd work with the venue beforehand. How are you doing your due diligence checks? Can we check on the welfare of people that are there, making sure someone's not doing 12 hours with one company, but then, the night before coming straight from 12 hours somewhere else, because that affects public safety. So team of investigators from Scotland, Northern Ireland, north of England, down to the tips of Cornwall, all over, and as you'd imagine, a lot in London and the southeast as well. And then we've got a criminal investigation team. So where we have got evidence that there is a criminal offence that's been committed, we've got a team that investigate it for criminal purposes and refers on to prosecutions where that's appropriate. Sometimes there's official warnings, sometimes there's advice and guidance, but at the other end of the spectrum, where it's appropriate, we'll take tough enforcement action. And we've had some successes there in bringing people to justice, not just the individual, but of course, if we can get the people who are supplying unlicensed security, and we've got a power as well to sometimes apply for confiscation orders, so where they've profited from it, to actually go for confiscation orders under Proceeds of Crime Act and try and take that money back from the criminals who have stolen it effectively from hardworking people.
There's actually so much that you do that I'm sure nobody had any idea the SIA was doing all this. And this is all paid for through the application fee.
That's right. We get a little bit of money from the Home Office that we have to apply for certain things, but most of how we operate is based on the licence fee, which, as I say, we take really seriously to make sure every single penny counts, and we're spending wisely and spending well, whilst all the time trying to cut our costs and be more efficient and effective at what we do.
Yeah. Okay, now I want to hear about your journey to becoming the CEO. So what made you choose the security industry to start with?
Do you know what? I think it sounds a bit cheesy, but I think it chose me in some respects. So a few years before I came to the SIA, I was approached and said, if you thought about working for the SIA, and I hadn't heard of them, if I was honest. I suspect, in fact, we know from some of the research that we carry out that not everyone has heard of the SIA, slightly more than some government bodies, but not as many as others. I didn't really know who they were or what they were doing, but I thought, okay, but not now. And then a few years later, I joined, and it's one of those things where you sort of read and think, oh, that's actually quite interesting. So I joined in the inspections and enforcement area, and it was just before COVID. Luckily, which I think is my style, I got out and I met every single person in my team just before lockdown. So I'd at least met them each physically all over the country. And then from there, my sort of pathway went to being chief executive and, learning. Every day is a school day, learning about different aspects of the licensing system, why, having that curiosity about why does that work like that and why was that decision made, and running the organisation. So I think there was an element to which stars collide, moments happen, don't they? It's sliding doors, but I think the Security Industry Authority found me.
And as the CEO, what would you say are your main key responsibilities?
So in a nutshell, I've got to run the organisation. I'm responsible for running the organisation on a day-to-day basis. So we have a board, so we have non-executives, so a non-executive board members together with the executive form the board. And we set the vision and the strategic direction of the organisation. So my job on a day-to-day basis is to implement the strategic direction that we've agreed we need to set. I'm also responsible for external stakeholder management, so getting out and meeting the industry, understanding what the industry needs from the regulator, making sure that we're not out of touch with what's going on in practice, looking ahead to see what's coming around the corner, to anticipate it. And there's a little bit of my job there's quite a lot of my job that deals with risk and things coming up and making sure things don't set us off course. Because you know what it's like in every organisation, there's always something that goes wrong or something unexpected or a drama or a crisis. So it's a real mix of things, but ultimately I'm responsible for making sure that we comply and carry out the job that Parliament's given us to do. We do it well within the money we've got, and we're looking ahead to the future to see how we can do it better.
Yeah. And with the security industry being a very male-dominated industry and being the first female CEO, have you faced many challenges?
It's a good question. So it's interesting, isn't it? So I thought the security industry would be like the police, which is much more equal in terms of male and female population. But so I suppose I was really shocked when I found out it was only 10% of licensed security officers that are female. So there's a bit of work to do there, isn't there, in terms of trying to attract more people who are female into the industry. Although I would say, although it's only 10% for frontline licence holders, if you look at our published data on non-frontline licence holders, it's 25%. So 25% of those who are, managers or owners of businesses who don't practice frontline operative work are actually female. So it's a surprise. Challenges, I think, so sometimes, particularly at the beginning, walking into a room, it was a sea of navy suits. But it's changing, I have to say. I feel as if it's changing. I feel as if there's more role models and more people in the industry who are stepping forward with diverse views on that. The other thing that I would just point out on diversity of the industry is about ethnicity. And, overwhelmingly, most of the people that I see when I'm going out on the front line at venues are not white, male 50 to 60-year-olds. They're young people, Generation Z. We've got Alpha coming up soon, haven't we? Generation Alpha, is that what it is? But a spectrum of different nationalities and views and practices. So that diversity piece is changing. I think we've got to be alert to that. But coming back to the question you asked, which was the challenges. So I've given you a couple of them there. There's still a little bit of pushback, I'd say, both in sort of from a public sector organisation as well as in the industry. So sometimes it's not as easy as it looks, but it is changing, and I do feel welcomed by the industry. And my own organisation, I'm really pleased to say we're a really diverse, great bunch of people that work for the SIA, who I'm really proud of and should be really proud of themselves, actually.
I know you like to get out of the field, very hands-on. So I think people seeing a woman in charge of the SIA, female CEO, it kind of gives people to look up to and think, okay, I could be doing that as well.
I hope so. I mean, I'm from very much a working class family. First person to go to university in my family. My grandparents were coal miners. So I hope I bring that work ethic. And I think if you know me as a person, I think a lot of people in the industry would say is I'm very down to earth. And I suppose the fact that I do like to go out and actually talk to frontline operatives and say, what's it like? What do you think of us? Is an important part for me of who I am, but also hopefully what I bring to the job. And if I, in my small part, can play of someone else seeing that there's a female who can, grow to a position of leadership and a position of authority, then I'm really pleased to be able to make that contribution, both to the private security industry and government and just women leadership. So,
is there anything that the SIA could be doing or is doing to encourage more women into the industry?
I talked earlier about the stakeholder forum and the 4 themes that we'd said we were going to concentrate on and try and work on together. So one of the things that the industry is really good at is trying to raise the profile about getting more women into security and also keeping them in and growing them and making things more accommodating to females. So I'm really supportive of the work that we're doing to support them. So the Women in Security Awards, the Women in Security Society, trying to get more of the other awards to include either diversity categories or to give appreciation to that. So trying to encourage role models and trying to, from within the industry that there are already, and trying to give the good stories about what different people can bring. Perhaps some of the softer skills. I'm often told that some of the best employees who are female in some of the businesses are the ones that are, just that either that intuition that something's not wrong in a way that they're a bit more alert to it, or that they're talking down people in a different way. I always use the example that if, a long time ago when I was out pubs and clubbing in my youth, I would probably find it more comfortable if I felt in trouble to go to someone who is a female door staff than I would to a male. I know that's not to say the male might not have been better, but I just feel probably more comfortable about doing that. So it's really important that we do try and change that old image of the industry and get more frontline female security operatives who not just join but stay and love it.
I hear that all the time when a woman's touch is needed. So what advice would you give to any female who was thinking about working in security?
I suppose not just for females, but I think it was anyone who's working in security, which is it's a really great job. If you're interested in people and if you're interested in keeping people safe and you want to be trained and supported to be able to do so and do a really important job, then actually think about private security. There was something interesting, I don't know if you've seen, there's a video that's going around at the minute where it's the opposite is also true, which is if you want a career in media, think about security. If you want a career in retail, think about security. If you want a career in festivals and events, think about security. So if you think about where security is, it's in hospitals, it's in national infrastructure, it's in retail, it's in the hospitality industry, it's in offices. When I joined the SIA, I remember thinking, oh my goodness, there's private security everywhere. And it's a bit like that invisible blanket, which is you sort of hope you don't need it, but there may just come a situation and a day where you are relying on that invisible blanket in the corner. And my goodness, I know from some of the stories I hear, that really makes a difference. Sometimes it saves a life. So security is great. There's more that the industry can do, and we're happy to support to raise that profile about the important work that they do. There's a lot to be proud of in the private security industry. Some things we need to still work on, but there's a lot to be proud of.
Yeah. You're saying there that security is a good way to get a foot in the door into certain jobs. Terry Crews actually got his first acting role by being security. Someone just saw him and said, come on.
There we are.
Get in. There you go.
There we are.
Michelle, it's been absolutely fantastic. But one more question, actually. So for anyone who has been working in security for, say, the past 5 years, and they want to make a career out of it, they want to take it to the next level, what advice would you give them?
Don't sit there thinking about it. Go and speak to your employer. Go and speak to your venue and say, I want to do that. Go and shadow. Push the bench. I want to be trained. I want to go on the next course that's available. Don't sit there and think about it. Do something about it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Carl.